I am going to tell you about the most expensive mistake I have ever watched a family make. Not expensive in the legal sense, though it was that too. Expensive in the sense that it cost them $8 million, 3 years of their lives, and the relationship between two siblings that has never been repaired. The mistake was not fraud. It was not negligence. It was not stupidity. It was something much more common than any of those things. It was a family that believed their mother's final wishes were obvious, so obvious that they did not need to be properly documented. A family that trusted that the people around their mother in her last months were simply there to provide care. A family that did not understand, until it was far too late, what can happen in the space between what a dying person intends and what the law recognizes. I spent 28 years as a probate attorney. I have seen this space, that gap between intention and documentation, cost families everything. I am going to tell you this specific story. Every detail I share with you has been changed to protect the people involved. The essential truth of it has not been changed at all. Pay attention, because this is not a story about an exceptional situation. It is a story about what happens when ordinary people make ordinary assumptions about extraordinary stakes. How I came to know this case. I did not represent the family in this case. I represented them in subsequent matters. After the probate proceedings had concluded, after the $8 million had been distributed, after the damage was done, I came to know the details through the particular intimacy that develops between an attorney and clients who are processing something that has broken them. The family, I will call them the Harmons, came to me 18 months after the probate concluded. They wanted to understand what had happened, not legally. They had their own legal representation during the proceedings. They wanted to understand in human terms how it was possible. I spent a great deal of time helping them understand that. And then I spent a great deal of time thinking about what I would need to tell other families so they did not find themselves in the same room asking the same questions 18 months too late. This is that conversation. Eleanor Harmon, who she was and what she had. Eleanor Harmon was 84 years old when she entered the final year of her life. She had been a businesswoman, not famous, not publicly known, but genuinely successful in the way that requires intelligence and sustained effort over many decades. She had 2 children, a son named Richard who lived 3 hours away and visited monthly, a daughter named Susan who lived 40 minutes away and visited weekly. Eleanor's estate was substantial, a home worth approximately $2 million, investments and savings that, at the time of her death, totaled approximately $6 million more. $8 million in total, held in accounts and assets that had been properly titled in her name. Eleanor had a will. It was 12 years old. In the 12 years since the will had been drafted, a great deal had changed. A grandchild had been born that the will did not mention, a property had been sold, and the proceeds invested differently than the will anticipated, and Eleanor's views on the distribution of her estate had evolved in ways that she had expressed to several people but had never formalized. This is the first thing I need you to understand. A will that is not current is not the same as a will that reflects your wishes. The document that governs your estate is the document that exists at your death, not the intentions you held in your mind, not the conversations you had with your children, not the updated wishes you meant to record when you got around to it. Eleanor had gotten around to almost everything in her long and organized life. She had not gotten around to updating her will, the night nurse, how she came to be there. In Eleanor's final 8 months, her care requirements increased significantly. Susan managed most of this, coordinating her mother's medical appointments, overseeing her home care, visiting several times a week. In the last 4 months, Eleanor's nighttime needs required professional nursing care. A night nurse was engaged, a woman in her 50s who came recommended through an agency, who was qualified and who developed, over those 4 months, a relationship with Eleanor that was by all accounts genuine. I want to be careful here. I am not going to tell you that the night nurse was predatory or calculating, or that her affection for Eleanor was false. What I am going to tell you is what happened. And what happened can be explained by genuine affection just as easily as by calculation, which is one of the reasons it is so difficult to protect against. In the final weeks of Eleanor's life, changes were made to her estate documents. A new will was drafted and signed. A beneficiary designation was changed on one of her investment accounts. Both instruments, in their revised form, directed a significant portion of Eleanor's estate to the night nurse. The total value of what was directed to the night nurse across both instruments was approximately $4 million. Combined with other bequests in the new documents, the Harmon children's share of their mother's estate was reduced by approximately $8 million from what the original will would have provided. The new will was properly executed. The beneficiary designation was properly completed. Both were legally valid. This is the second thing I need you to understand. Legal validity and moral legitimacy are not the same thing. A document can be properly signed and witnessed and still reflect circumstances, pressure, manipulation, or simply the particular vulnerability of a dying person in the presence of someone who provides comfort that the law finds very difficult to address. Part 3. The probate. What the law could and could not do. Richard and Susan contested the will. They had grounds to contest, or so they believed. Their mother had been elderly and unwell. Changes of this magnitude made in the final weeks of life, in the presence of a paid caregiver who benefited directly from those changes, raised questions about undue influence and testamentary capacity that a court would take seriously. The court did take them seriously. The probate proceedings lasted 3 years. Here is what the court found and why it found it. Eleanor's capacity at the time of signing was documented by her physician, who had examined her and provided a letter confirming that she was of sound mind. The physician had not known about the specific changes being made to the will. He had been asked a general question about capacity, not informed of the specific transaction. The new will had been witnessed by 2 individuals who were not the night nurse and who had no apparent interest in the outcome. Both testified that Eleanor had appeared clear and deliberate. The attorney who drafted the new will testified that Eleanor had communicated her wishes directly and had not appeared to be under any pressure. He had not been the family's regular attorney. He had been engaged for this specific transaction. The night nurse testified that Eleanor had raised the subject of her estate independently, that she had expressed disappointment with the way certain family relationships had developed, and that the changes to the will reflected Eleanor's own settled wishes. Richard and Susan had a different account of their mother's relationship with the night nurse. They had observations and concerns and the particular conviction of children who believed they knew their mother. What they did not have was documentation. They had no contemporaneous record of their mother's stated intentions, no letters, no recorded conversations, No notes from the family physician documenting Eleanor's wishes as she had expressed them over the years. No previous communications with an attorney that established what Eleanor had consistently intended. The court, confronted with a properly executed legal document on one side, and the family's testimony about their mother's character and intentions on the other, found in favor of the will. The night nurse received her inheritance, 3 years of litigation, significant legal fees on both sides, and a finding that was legally correct because the legal instruments were valid, regardless of whether it was morally correct. I cannot tell you whether Eleanor's final wishes were genuine or influenced. I was not there. Nobody who was there left a record that the court found dispositive. That is the point. Part 4. What the Harmon family did wrong and what you can do differently. I spent a long time with Richard and Susan Harmon helping them understand not what happened in the probate. They understood that, but how it happened. What allowed it? The honest answer is that the Harmon family made every mistake that comfortable, trusting, loving families routinely make. They had not updated their mother's will in 12 years because Eleanor seemed healthy and the original will seemed adequate, and the conversation about death and money is one that most families defer indefinitely. They had not established a clear contemporaneous record of their mother's wishes in writing through an attorney, documented in a way that would withstand scrutiny, because Eleanor had told them what she intended and they had trusted that telling. They had not put in place the protections specifically designed for the period of heightened vulnerability that precedes death, independent professional oversight of their mother's decision-making, involvement of her longtime attorney in any significant changes, requirements that changes of this magnitude be reviewed by someone with no stake in the outcome. And they had not recognized that the people who spend the most intimate time with a dying person, the caregivers who are present at 3 a.m., who hold the hand that no one else is there to hold, who become, in those final months, the most consistent human presence in a vulnerable person's life, those people occupy a position of extraordinary influence. Not necessarily malign influence, not necessarily calculated influence, but influence. The law understands this. There are legal mechanisms specifically designed to address it. Independent oversight of changes made in the final period of life, requirements that the person's longtime advisors be involved, cooling periods before significant changes take effect. None of these mechanisms were in place for Eleanor. Here is what I tell every client who will listen to me now. Update your will. Not when you think you need to. Now. Every 3 to 5 years at minimum, and immediately after any significant life change. Document your intentions, not just in your will, in letters to your attorney, in conversations that are recorded and dated, in communications that establish a consistent and contemporaneous record of what you want. Put protections in place for the vulnerable period. Require that your longtime attorney review any changes made in the last year of your life. Require a waiting period. Name an independent person to oversee your decision-making if your capacity is ever in question. And talk to your family, not generally, specifically. Tell them what you intend, why you intend it, and what would change your mind. Create a record of those conversations. Leave nothing to the assumption that your wishes are obvious. They are not obvious. Eleanor's children believed they were obvious. The court found otherwise. What I have never been able to resolve. I want to end with something honest that I have been sitting with for many years. I do not know what Eleanor Harmon wanted. I know what the legal document said. I know what the court found. I know what Richard and Susan believed. I know what the night nurse testified. I do not know what an 84-year-old woman in the final weeks of her life, in the presence of someone who had been her most consistent human contact for 4 months, actually felt and intended and chose. Maybe Eleanor changed her mind. Maybe years of complicated family relationships had produced a genuine desire to direct a portion of her estate to someone who had simply been there, present and attentive in a way that, for reasons I cannot know, her children had not fully been. Maybe she did not change her mind. Maybe the vulnerability of those final weeks made her susceptible to influence that she would not have been susceptible to at 74 or 64. The law resolved the question legally. It did not resolve it humanly. What I am left with, what has stayed with me across every case like this that I have encountered, is not anger at the night nurse or at the outcome. It is the understanding that the space between what we intend and what we document is where most of the damage in estate law actually lives. Eleanor Harmon had a lifetime of clear intentions. She simply did not leave a clear enough record of them to protect those intentions when it mattered most. You still have time to leave that record. Please do. 28 years of probate law, hundreds of families. One case that has never left me, the $8 million inheritance a night nurse won in probate. Update your will. Document your intentions. Protect the vulnerable period. Talk to your family specifically, not generally. Do not leave the space between your intentions and your documentation for someone else to fill, because someone will fill it. The law will fill it. A probate court will fill it. And the filling may bear no resemblance to what you wanted. Eleanor Harmon wanted something. I believe that. I simply do not know what it was. Make sure the people who come after you know what you wanted. Make it undeniable. I'll see you in the next one.